Algebra 2 Honors Lesson 2-7 Linear Inequalities and Absolute Value Inequalities. Okay, here are the lesson's objectives. Now let's recall slope-intercept form where we had y is equal to mx plus b. Alright, when we used to graph this, we would get a line. Right? Graphing a linear inequality is the exact same thing. The only thing different is instead of an equal sign, we have an inequality symbol. Okay? Now here are the 4 different types of inequality symbols we might have. Right? You might have greater than or equal to, less than, or less than or equal to. Okay? Now, just remember, if it's greater than, right, if it's greater than, we're going to shade above the line later. Shade above the line. Now, what do I mean by shade above the line? Right? Let's say we have a line. Let's say we have a graph. And the line is like that. We're going to shade above the line. Right? Meaning we should be shading this area over here. Now, if it's less than, right, and we have a graph. Let's see, I'll make the line in blue so it's clearer. So we have a line. If it's less than, we shade below the line. Right, we shade below the line. So we would be shading in this area. Right, so that's what I mean by shade above or shade below the line. Now, if you have a greater than or equal to symbol, if you have a solid line right here, when you make your solid line, right, when you make your line, it'll be solid. Okay. Now, if you have just the greater than or less than symbol without the line, when you draw your line, right, it should be dotted or dashed. Okay. So let's get to some of these examples. Okay, so let's take a look at number 1 here. Well, to graph this, we need to get y by itself. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Alright, I would minus 3x right here. Minus 3x. So I would end up with negative 2y is less than or equal to negative 3x minus 4. Divide everything by negative 2. So y is going to be greater than or equal to, right, 3 over 2x plus 2. Alright, let me draw that a little bit better. Alright, now you notice, alright, we flipped the inequality symbol around. Why did we flip it around? Because as you recall, if we divide both sides by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality symbol before. Okay, so let's graph this now. Here's positive 2. Alright, remember this is where you start at right here. Your y-intercept, this is where you start. Our slope is 3 over 2, so that means we're going to move up 3. 1, 2, 3 over 2, make another point. Now, is the line we draw is going to be solid or dotted? Well, if you have a solid line right here, or the equal to part, you know it's going to be a solid. Alright, it's going to be a solid line. Okay, so let's make a solid line. Now, where are we going to shade? Well, we're going to shade above. Right, so we shade above. Let's see, I'll do it in blue. Right. Why do we shade above? Because it's greater than. So we're going to shade above. Alright, I like to make a few arrows just to indicate where I'm going to shade. Alright, then you can shade above the line right there. Okay? Let's take a look at number 2. X is less than 2. Well, how did we graph this before? Remember when we only had the x variable? Well, you would go to 2 on the x-axis, right? Now, if it's just a less than symbol without the line, you know it's going to be dotted. So we're going to make a vertical line, right? So let's make a vertical line, and you know it's going to be dotted right here. Right, it's going to be kind of hard to see. Maybe I should make it a little bit thicker. Let's see if I can make it a little bit thicker. There we go. I guess it's a lot thicker, but You guys get the point. Now, so we have a vertical line right there. All right. Now, if x is less than 2, think of less than 2 on the x-axis. Okay? Where is less than 2 on the x-axis? Here's the x-axis. These numbers, all these numbers over here are less than 2, so we're shading right this way. Okay? So we're shading all the values over here because all these values are less than 2. All right? Let's graph right here y is greater than negative 2. Right? Y is greater than negative 2. So we have y greater than negative 2. So we're going to go to negative 2 on the y-axis. Here you go. What kind of line are we going to have? Well, we're going to have a dotted line, right? That is horizontal. So I'll make a dotted line right here. Now if y is greater than 2, where are all the values greater than 2? Well, they're up, right? They're up. So you're going to shade above this line over here. Okay? Alright, let's take a look at the next example. Alright, number 4. Alright, x is greater than or equal to y. Well, x is greater than or equal to y. How are we going to graph this? Some students have a hard time with this because, well, there aren't really any numbers. Alright, first of all, you have to notice y is on the right side. Alright, I would rewrite this as y is less than or equal to x. Alright, because we're used to y on the left side. That way we won't shade in the wrong area, right, and get confused. So if there's no number here, you know we're going to start at 0. That's our y-intercept, 0. The slope, if there's no number here, that means there's an imaginary 1 over 1. So that's going to mean we move up 1 over 1, right? Is our line going to be solid or dotted? Well, it's going to be a solid line. And where are we going to shade? Well, we're going to shade below because it's less than. So we're going to shade below the line. So you would be shading this area right here. Alright. Alright, and let's take a look at number 5. Alright, well, we have x over 3 is less than or equal to negative y plus 2. So, well, we need to get y by itself. I would subtract 2, so we're going to get x over 3 minus 2 is less than or equal to negative y. Y has to be positive, divide by negative 1. So this will give us negative x over 3 plus 2 is greater than or equal to, we're going to flip this around right here, positive y now. Now I would rewrite this so that y is on the left side. This is the same thing as y is less than or equal to negative. Alright, now remember there's an imaginary 1 here. So that's negative 1/3 x, right, plus 2. Now let's graph this. So our y-intercept is positive 2. Our slope is negative 1 over 3. So we're going to move down 1 over 3. Here you go, let's make a point. What kind of line are we going to have? Well, it's going to be solid. Where are we going to shade? Right. Well, if it's less than, we're going to shade below the line. So we're going to shade this area right here. Okay. Let's take a look at number 6. X plus 2y is greater than or equal to 6. Well, it's minus x. We get 2y is greater than or equal to negative x plus 6. Let's divide everything by 2. This divides out. We get y, right? We didn't divide by negative, so the symbol stays the same. Right? Imagine there's a 1 here, so that's negative 1 over 2x plus 3. So we're going to have positive 3 on the y-axis, negative 1 over 2. So that's going to mean we move down 1 over 2. Is it solid or dotted, the line? Well, we have an equal to part, so you know it's going to be solid. what do we shade, up or down? If it's greater than, we're going to shade up. So we're going to shade above the line, or up. Make some arrows going up so you know which side you're going to shade. All right, and that's it. Alright, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to graph absolute value inequalities. Alright, now to graph an absolute value inequality, I'm going to graph this one right now. Alright, letter A. Well, y is already by itself. Make sure y is always by itself. Alright, so we're going to find the vertex, like we did before when we were graphing absolute values. Alright, you guys know how to do this. So our vertex here, alright, remember we use the shortcut method because there's a positive 1 in front of the x. So we graph this. Alright, take the opposite of -4. That'll be your x value, so it'll be +4. +5 stays the same. So our vertex is 4 and 5. So it's +4, +5. There's our vertex. What's our a value? There's an imaginary 1 here. So that means we move over 1, up 1. Over 1, up 1. Left 1, up 1. Left 1, up 1. Let's make our v. Let me change this real quick. This should be solid now. Okay. But now since we have an inequality symbol, if it's less than or equal to, remember before, if it's less than, we shade below. So we're going to have to shade below now. So if we shade below this graph, it's going to be over here. So we're going to have to shade the area below the absolute value graph. Okay? And also you notice this was solid. Our lines were solid because you had an equal to part right here. Okay? So basically you're following kind of the same rules and concepts for graphing linear inequalities. Alright, let me graph B right now. So we'll graph this one right now. Now y is not by itself yet and it's not positive. So what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to -3. So -3 over here. So we're going to get negative y is greater than the absolute value of x plus 1 minus 3. Now you need to get this positive, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to divide by -1. If you divide this by -1, divide this by -1, divide this by -1, we're going to get y. Since we divided by negative, it'll flip the arrow over. Now this absolute value, remember it was positive, right? So since we divided by negative, we're going to make this absolute value negative right here. So negative absolute value now. All right, everything inside the absolute value stays the same. Then this -3 divided by -1 will be +3. Now we can find our vertex. Right, so the vertex in this case will be -1 and +3. So -1 and +3. There's our vertex. Our a value is -1 now, so that's going to mean we move over 1, down 1, over 1, down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1, down 1. And then let's graph our line. Right. Now it's going to be dotted. Right. Why is it going to be dotted? Well, because there's no equal to line right here, so we're going to make a dotted line. Right. Now, where are we going to shade? If it's less than, we're going to shade down below the graph. So we're going to be shading inside this area right here. Okay? Now, these problems right here, well, basically what we're going to do is alright, now if they give you a graph, you're going to have to be able to find the equation, okay? So we're working opposite. The first thing you should always find is always the vertex, right? So the vertex in this case is right here. So let's find the coordinates of our vertex. That looks like 3 and 2. Right? Now let's start with our equation. It always starts with y. Okay? Now it looks like if we shaded above here, so it's going to be greater than. The lines are solid, so you know you're going to have the equal to part. Right? Now let's start with the absolute value. Alright, it's always going to be x. Now if this value here is 3, remember we're going to put the opposite, negative 3. And this is 2, so we're going to have a positive 2. Now we need to find the a value. Alright, what goes in front of the absolute value? Well, let's start at the vertex. You move over, and then you move up until you hit the line. Well, we went up 1, and then we hit the line. Right, you move over, you went up 1, you hit the line. So you know this value is going to be positive 1. Right, just like we did in the previous lesson. Right, so that's how you find the equation. Right, if they give you a graph. Right, should be no problems at all. Let me do this one last example right here. So let's find the vertex again. Right, our vertex is right here. So let's find those coordinates. Looks like -4 and -3. -4, -3. So I'm going to start with my equation, y. Right? Let's say we shaded below the graph. So that's going to be less than. The lines are solid. So you have the equal to part. Then I'll start with the absolute value and then the x. What's our vertex? -4, so you're going to put the opposite, +4. If this is -3, you just put -3. Let's find our a value. Well, looks like we move over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1. So you know we're moving up 1, so that's our a value. Okay? And that's it.